Hello, everyone. Welcome to Esoteric Book Club. I'm Haley. Just kidding. This week, we're talking about the star in Meditations on the Tarot. So let's go through overall impressions of the chapter. Yeah. And then we'll go into specifics of each kind of part he talked about. I finished the chapter, which is great. And I like the setup and the position of this chapter within the deck. I felt like it was like I'm much more equipped to orient the cards together, I feel now. Like I really like the pairings that he had with, the star, the Tower of Destruction, and the sun, so the cards around it really made a lot of sense the way and which they do in the tarot deck too, but I felt this chapter brought a lot of clarity around some of the things that I didn't really know about the star card in the tarot deck. I felt like he did a better job this chapter of, oh, it's the moon next, huh? Wait, we're talking about the star, yeah. Did I read all of? No, the moon's next. Okay, never mind. Gosh, blanking. I felt like he did I might have read way too much. No, I didn't. I'm blanking. Anyway, I felt like he did a better job describing women in this chapter than he has in previous chapters, which was really nice. I like that it lined up with a lot of things occurring right now in my life and in, I think, bigger life, because it's like Mother Mary Day or something for the Catholic Church. I don't think today is, but I know this past week was that. So it was kind of nice that Mary aligned in when Catholics celebrate her. And then when this chapter hit, I felt like that was really nice. And yeah, I did have question marks, definitely. I felt like there were some things that could have been that I just disagreed with, but I appreciated his perspective on. So yeah, it's getting easier and easier for me to read him. So by the end, I should have a full understanding of where he comes from. Cody, what was your overall impressions?
Yeah, I thought it was a really beautiful chapter. It's an interestingly elusive card to me. It has been, and I think this chapter definitely has helped me figure it out, or at least get a sense. I feel like I have a more visceral sense of the card now, and I feel like that's really necessary for this card. It's like it needs to penetrate the flow of the whole body kind of thing. It's not a super intellectual card. It's like a flow embodied card, unlike some of the others. I feel like they actually progressively get that way anyway, from 1 to 21, and then 0 is the fool outside of everything. But so I've felt that before, and I feel like it's verified a bit in this, but they're not, well, I mean, they continue to be intellectual because because things get more graspable as you get lower down on the tree of life, but so I like this one as the flow, and I was thinking about and I add I of course am always reading things with the context of what I already kind of know, and how this card is between the Netzach and Yesod on the tree of life. That's an interesting placement, and how that works with this card is cool. This description, and maybe we can talk about that too. But yeah, it's nice. It's a really nice card. It's one of the more beautiful cards, I think. I kind of don't like the this one that much. I think it's just kind of like, it's like doesn't, but like the Crowley one is so nice.
Nice.
Like the
Yeah,
back that
beautiful.
is like so pretty.
Because it does say that reaching more
Emerald.
and connecting.
Yeah, and more spirals and fractals and stuff. Like there's kind of this fractal spiral thing going on, which he talks about the spirals in this one, but the card doesn't show spirals. You know, I like that whole, and he elucidates, and I like yeah, he connects this with the tower, but it's also connected with the Empress. He gets
Oh.
into like the sacred magic of the Empress card, and also I think he even connects it to temperance, but also the wheel, you know, because like the spiral out instead of like the circle, the enclosed circle, the wave spiraling out. And I think he actually like, I think we've talked about that more. He didn't elaborate on the spiraling so much on that card, but we talked about that. And then this elaborates on that. So I thought that was cool.
That is cool. Nice. Okay, Britannia, what did you think of this chapter? Oh, cutting out. Oh, and you're
You're
muted.
also muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I really love this chapter. I agree with everything you guys said. I feel like the comparisons and the breakdowns and the reflecting back on the other cards to see like the bigger, I guess, inner working of what he was saying kind of brought it all together in a really beautiful way. Yeah, I really like that he brought it back to like femininity and hope. And I don't know, that part was like off-puttingly empowering coming from him, because I don't feel like he'd done that yet. And I was like, okay. You know, like there were other cards that I thought had like a little feminine vibe, like temperance and stuff. And I thought he'd probably broach the subject there, but I'm glad that it was something on his mind or in his mind. I think that the way he goes about building on the card's knowledge based off previous cards, in a lot of ways really strengthen the chapter too. A lot of his like allegories and citations really built well. And yeah, I mean, I think it read a lot easier, like you guys said too. It was interesting because he took it really deep, but in such a simplistic way, and like the dualism and like the way he broke down dualism. And I really like how, you know, the cards obviously pointing both faces into like the bigger flow. And I like how he talks about like the marriage of opposites and like nailing those two things together. I think that kind of aligns with a lot of like the alchemic work that he's talking about that he does. I think it's like he tries to shy away from like magical terms because he's like obviously like more of a Christian hermeticist, but he really refers to this process of like alchemizing and having that choice of yes or no, you know, and bridging that divide, like how he's talking about it's all a continuation, it's all continuous. And I was hoping for him to get to that point, but I was wondering if he ever would, in the sense that I wondered if his religious beliefs would allow him to. And I think in this chapter, instead of comparing things and kind of saying this is what's wrong about it, he was comparing things and saying this is what's right about it. And I think that's kind of more my approach when I like reading, writing, or just conversing about things. I think it is important for him to be able to have like these two pillars of like, this is what I'm talking about and this is what I'm talking about, and here's the thing that we're going for in the middle, like, so you have like orientation with the ideas. But I felt like this was a more constructive, positive, hope-filled chapter in that sense of finding ideology that connects everything, you know, connects different religions, different practices, and that they're all like two sides of the same coin, like whether it's the energy that was like flowing above the orb above or the orb below, like they're two different types of growth, and they're both like endowed with like spiritual and like magic like energy. And that no matter like, I mean, no matter which way you go, you're still gonna have that presence. And I think it was just like the hope of like tapping in and like surrendering into that to be able to have a better life and a better tomorrow and a better future and just better, I don't know, acknowledgement of the deeper truths of things. And I really like that. I think that was kind of where I was like nerding out super hard when he was just, I don't know. There's something about when people write in a way in which they have hope that people are going to receive it and do something with it. And he has definitely like become that kind of writer very quickly, like with my experience with him. And I think each acknowledgement of the card has some of that like spark in it for like tapping into like that flow and like having that like action that you take in your life. You can't just read this book and not apply it to yourself in like a deeper way. And I really love that. I think about this chapter the most. I think this chapter resonated with me the most.
Agreed.
So, yeah. My TED talk, thank you.
Cool. Agreed. Let's get into the nitty-gritty. So he's first talking about growth, right? Construction and that of growth. 16th card presents us in with the alternative of two ways, that of construction and that of growth. So I think this is cool to attribute the card after what the Tower card, that the next card is growth. I think that's really nice. And the tree kind of metaphor he brings again, but just describing more of, yeah, the agent that links us to the growth, right? So then talking about, yeah, and for angelic, inspiration and the agent of growth have this in common, that they flow, that they do not act through shocks and discharges, but in a continuous way. Continuous transformation is the essential manifestation of the agent of growth, just as creative lightning, it is that of magical agent. Do we all agree with this? I mean, I don't know if there's anything to really disagree with.
Yeah, I think it's like, I like what he brings in, the quote, the long quote from Bergeson later, is this like the continuity. It's like, I feel like he's maybe a bit ahead of his time, even in this way of thinking in the Western world. This like flow. Bergson was ahead of his time in that sense. Or Bergson was like one of the first, was like one of the earlier philosophers in the West to like posit this stuff philosophically. Of course, like, and it's kind of like bringing in the animate world, the agency of the world, the agency of other, to like in the flow of nature, right? The flow of growth. Instead of just like, and it's like positing against this kind of like normal rationalist, materialist viewpoint that's so prevalent, so dominant in the West. I guess it's like he counters that a lot in this book. This chapter really does it, in that like that these discrete cells aren't really what make a thing. It's the flow of the cells through time and together and interrelationship that makes thing the thing, and process and continuity, rather than just like one thing stacked on top of another, really make the life of the universe happen. That's really important idea, I think, to seed, so to speak, into culture, I think.
No, yeah, I think that perspective of life is, yeah, I agree. Like, what is, I mean, I don't want to say healthier, but yeah, more like intuitive and modern way to live, I guess. Or I think he was ahead of his time. I think more people think that now than probably did back then.
Yeah. And yeah, it's a
Yeah.
philosophy that's catching on, which I think is really beautiful. Like and we've talked about this before too, like interrelatedness and not just isolationist.
What it is a flux, the continuity of transition. It is change itself that is real. That's Henry Bergson. There's static.
That was a solid passage.
It went away.
I like how it was like on 469, he like kind of defines the difference between capital fire and lowercase fire and water. And you know, I don't know. I really like how he brought that back into it, because those are like the elements, the agents in which he's like kind of speaking of, I think. Like the two sides of the coin, like the above and below of like those two agents. And talks about like the celestial fire, the fire of divine love, and the fire of electricity due to friction. It says there's celestial water, the sap of growth and progress and evolution, and there's the lower water of intrinsically collective unconscious, engulfing collectivity, i.e. the floods and drowning.
Yeah.
Because I think that was where he kind of acknowledged what we were kind of pressing on him in the last chapter. We're like, oh, he doesn't acknowledge that, like the shadow work and all that. But I think he is here like acknowledging that there's like sacred, spiritual, and magical like elements to those as well, you know, and they may not be like upward and forward like hope is, you know, but I think that's kind of what reflecting back on the destruction of like the tower card. Like that was really like nice to read after that, like reading back, you know, backwards with it. I don't know. It's really cool. This book kind of reminds me of like Star Wars, where like in different orders, this book can make different types of sense to you.
Yeah. How like Star Wars though?
Yeah, how like Star Wars.
I don't understand. I mean, because I love, I agree.
Because like, okay, so like most of the movies, yeah, most of the movies and stuff, like they start with you like in the middle of the story, you know, and then you kind of have to move backwards or forwards in time as they release like the movies. Like I know most people didn't read them. I read them. So I was like, oh, I experienced it in a different order than like the rest of the world, basically. I was like, I know what's happening and oh, it's gonna happen before and after this. And everyone's like, what's gonna happen next? And I was like, oh. But I think with this book, like we were talking like last week, or 2 weeks ago, about how different orders of the cards would make them make more sense, or you know what I mean? Like it left us like wondering and questioning and having like assertions or contrarian beliefs with him. But then like the farther we'd read in, he would reflect back on that card in a more in-depth way that kind of related it back to more than one card, which kind of pulled the whole bag a little bit tighter, you know? I feel like this card pretty much did that for like the last few cards for me, where I was like, oh, there was things that I disagreed with or felt like he could have gone deeper on, or wondered why he didn't talk about so much. And you know, when you do approach this book, at first he seems very like, oh, this is this card, this is this card. But when you begin to read more than like a few chapters, you realize that the entire book is woven together, interwoven. But it's really interesting how he only builds backwards. I don't know, I was just noticing that in like the way he writes.
He does reference though, like in the future I will talk about this card. So that's kind
he
of
always does it at the end of a chapter though. It's like it's kind of like a 90s like cartoon when they're like, next week on, you know, Scooby-Doo, like find out if they unmask the burglar. Like I like he does that though, because it does weave it together nicely.
Yeah.
Continuity. He's just going for it.
I've come to like see, I have a hard time sometimes like distinguishing cards sometimes. I think about like this card and I see some of it similar, and then I go, oh, but there's some of this in the strength card, or the, you know, you can pair it almost with any, and I think I have a feeling that they are all contained within each other
I think
in a
that's the
cool
point, right?
like way. Yeah. And they're all just like interesting, subtle variants of like how the energy is. Like this is like the Lover's card, maybe, or like the or even Justice, where like two opposing forces are balanced.
With like the
But
wheel to
yeah, or the wheel, yeah, all these ways that forces. But this is like the water aspect of it, and it's like a little more. And if you think of it like yin yang, it's a little more on the yin. It's definitely on the yin side. It's on that yin side
His comparisons of
the
water and fire to like the different, to the different cards was really cool too.
yeah.
I think if we see, I think that's where some of the planetary associations and like astrological and then also like elemental like associations would really come into play. Actually, yeah, because that's more on like a strategic kind of way of like identifying all those things and seeing if the lovers, justice, and the wheel and the star all have similar and then what that like kind of means for the energy there, if they're all maybe like Venus associated or something that is attributed more to, or like in water cards or something. But I don't know that.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I mean, I feel like that's more like Lon Milo Duquette's territory, right? Like I have the deck of ceremonial magic,
Oh, right. He has all
which
those
is
associations.
kind of above my pay grade. But that'd be like a next kind of step for a book like this, is to, not a next step, but just like a much more like calculated step, I guess, would be to like map all that out,
Yeah.
which that always excites me for some reason.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
you're like your
calculation
like
of infintescence that he was talking about.
Oh,
He was talking about how they like revolutionized like math because they opened it up to like the like I don't know. I remember reading about this in math and then like having him talk about what's his face's approach to, he like adds kind of like the magical element of like variation into mathematics, which creates like the future of math in like
calculus.
the sense that with like standard deviations and like margins of error and just things like that, like there can be so much attributed to that. You even think of like the computing power of computers now, like that's like directly like from that like revolutionizing of the way we think about math and science.
By the way, Leibniz wasn't the first person to come up with calculus. There was an Indian mathematician in like the 15th or 16th century who devised calculus.
Ooh.
But it didn't really get out.
And I thought there was somebody else that was like in one of the Arabic nations.
I actually did hear.
Created like I remember his approach towards calculus.
Yeah.
I think it's even more reaffirming to know that it happened in more than one place.
That's what
completely
I've
independent
heard
of each other. Like that, like some people battle over whose prophets, right? And I'm like, do you not see that like all these prophets coming around and saying the same shit is like so much more important than which prophet showed up in which neighborhood? Like, do you think you know what I mean? Like what?
Well, I mean,
we're all saying the same thing.
That story, the calculus founding story or the discovery of calculus story proves like, or that's what I've heard as like proof for collective consciousness stuff. Cause it's like once somebody's figured it out, then it just spirals like, and you'll figure it out elsewhere in the world, especially if it's something like that, like a completely new way of thinking, like math. That's like fucking heavy, excuse my French, but like, that'd be like kind of like universal, like in the consciousness, I feel, versus like other things where it's like you can like invent a song and then other people can have that type of song and like maybe there's more variations on that, but like a way of thinking math, I don't know.
Well, any given way of thinking, any given way of thinking about the world is going to be predicated on a certain base of knowledge. So like you can't, so like I feel like maybe even that Indian philosopher who came up with calculus before Leibniz had that base of knowledge better ingrained before the Europeans did, just like Arabic philosophers were well endowed with Aristotle and Plato well before the Enlightenment,
Mm.
and came up with a lot of shit before the European Christians did. So I don't know. It's just a matter of
Perspective and who won
it's
the
a
war.
matter of what knowledge streams and how things are transmitted that allow for certain things to be discovered,
Well, yeah.
and certain realms
Yeah.
of knowledge are different than other realms. So it's not saying any realm is better, but it's not necessarily that any separate cultures are going to come up with the same shit in the same way, and they'll think about things differently. And that's what's really important too.
Cool. I found the card in the ceremonial deck. You kind of can't see it because of my light, but I mean, it's kind of cool. It's not I like the art, but it's not like the Thoth deck, but they do more of the Goetic and the Enochian kind of associations though. And it's Aquarius, but I don't know and then I think Hode. There's some character that it's one of the Hebrew alphabet, but it's not Shin.
Saudi, right? It's Saudi, right?
I don't know.
It's Saudi.
What is Saudi? Is Saudi it's this
I think
one.
It's Saudi. It's the fish hook one.
Yeah.
Oh,
I mean, it might be backwards for you.
Yeah.
But then that's the Goetic.
Oh.
And I think that's the Enochian.
Did you like his throwback to the Thoth?
Well, it's funny he mentions, throwback to Thoth? What?
He said he was gonna rescue this book from the ashes to make reference to what it did well. Where is it?
What part is that?
Yeah. Here on page 467, he's like, I take the occasion to rescue from the oblivion the work of a man that is probably either already forgotten or has not been noticed. The Sacred Book of the Thoth.
Oh.
Published in Russia, 1916 or 17.
That's not.
And he just that's where I was referencing the differential and integral calculus.
But that's not from the Thoth. I mean, Aleister Crowley might have taken that. Oh, sorry.
No, but that's why I wanted to ask you. I knew it wasn't Aleister Crowley. I knew it's a completely separate thing, but I wanted to, because Aleister Crowley used a lot of mathematics in his ways of defining things. And so I was wondering if you guys thought that was a throwback, like an intentional throwback.
It was somebody else. I don't know. I don't think it was Crowley though.
I think
no, I know that. No, I'm.
Oh.
Yeah, I do think he was throwing it back to that guy, who's like probably an obscure, because he was an engineer, so he wasn't recognized as a spiritual writer, probably, right? Isn't that what he was saying? And that he did a lot of calculus in his book, but it was with a bunch of languages, and it was really hard to read because you had to know all the languages. He didn't translate it. I mean, I feel like that was right up Aleister Crowley's alley. I mean, not to say it like that, that'd be like the guy that would read a book it's the engineer.
Well, because Aleister Crowley was doing the same. Sorry.
It was doing the same thing at that time?
Well, he was doing kind of the same thing where Aleister Crowley was trying to kind of take all the good parts from the knowledge that he had and kind of bridge it that was a continuity of the certain knowledges that he's accrued, plus he added a lot more mathematics to it to appeal to more of spiritual science and math behind it. So I don't know, it kind of seemed like this guy was kind of doing that in his own way back in his time.
Which you're right. I mean, but it's also, that's kind of interesting because I mean, Golden Dawn was before 1916 and 17, right?
Yeah.
So I think it was just trendy.
I'm sure.
Yeah, I think it was. I think it was like the 1840s or something to like the 1920s or something. I don't know.
That
Bad magicians. But I do think this was, I think
Yeah.
that was, I mean, I don't know. I don't want to read it because I don't know any of the languages. But it'd be interesting to like own it because I'm sure it's super gnarly.
I mean, there's always a key with like symbols, so you can really plug things in one time and just know what it's saying, like in equations. But yeah, no, I was just because like I don't know as much about like call it magic lore because I don't know as much about like the hierarchical stuff or like the orders and things like that as you guys. So that's why I was asking. I wasn't doing it as like a contrarian or
He
like,
might have
like
been, no.
trying to make a point. It was more of just like a genuine like little kid question.
Oh, okay. Wait, what was the question? I think.
Oh no, no. I think we like kind of answered it. I think it was
Okay.
probably just like parallel ideas.
Yeah, I think
more
so.
so than it was.
I mean,
yeah.
that guy might have been in an order or something because it sounds like he was just an engineer, but I don't know if.
He said he wasn't associated with any orders or societies.
Oh. Yeah. Yeah, that's cool.
That's why I was just like, because we were talking about how like the independent thought like arises in like different places. Once one thought has like been thought somewhere, it makes it come into existence, and so it's more like accessible to be grasped by inside the collective conscious.
Oh, I think he was saying
interesting?
that. I think he was saying Henry Bergson wasn't affiliated with initiations and orders or societies, but not
but
Shmakov.
Okay.
Rescue from Oblivion. What?
Bergson was a continental philosopher, right? Like, pretty much steeped in the continental tradition.
I don't know. I don't know really
so.
much about it. That's cool.
Yeah. Academic philosopher.
Cool.
Yeah, like his what I believe at the end, like right, like a few days before he died, like from his diary.
Yeah.
Like they brought out the like what he knows, like the letters from Paul to the Corinthians.
Oh, that's Chardin, Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, right? He's quoting there. Who he loves in this whole book is like he brings that guy up all the time.
He does bring that guy up, huh?
Mm-hmm. He's the guy who wrote about evolution and Catholicism, kind of like the whole like linking kind of spirituality with with the theory of evolution. He was a biologist.
And a father.
I don't know if he was a priest, but he was a biologist. He might have been.
Well, it says father. Father Teilhard de Chardin.
Pierre Teilhard de Chardin.
No, but right above that.
Father, maybe he was a priest too. Yeah, I think he might have been a Catholic priest, actually.
Which I think a lot of priests back then were like scientists. Like that was really common.
Well, I think he was a 20th century.
Oh, really? Oh, 1955. Yeah, never mind.
Yeah. He was working with like the cutting edge of evolution at the time. Which actually, I think a lot of what his stuff is I read a little Wikipedia article about him, and it's like he's pretty controversial. Like scientists kind of like don't like him very much because he's applying Christian eschatology to evolution, and that's a little bit where this author loses me too. He's so into this guy, and this guy is like, it's a little bit scientifically flawed, and like he's like trying too hard to like fit the Christian eschatology to everything. And then this chapter even has that part, which is like that part of this chapter was like that just went past me because I don't find that very like helpful.
I agree.
Stuff in this book. That's the stuff that I've kind of started to discount a little bit. But
I agree.
Yeah, I feel like that's where I started discounting things, but I've gotten like better at seeing through it's gonna sound weird, but like seeing through his Christianity and just seeing what he's actually saying. Cause like that's been my hang up in every chapter. And I think with my family, like so heavily Catholic, and the way they even talk to you on a normal everyday, you can hear what they're actually saying. You can hear what they're like verbally saying. They're actually saying to, you know, just like I don't know. There's like a little bit of a veil there, but I think it's cool, at least for me, to be exposed to like the inner workings of why someone feels so spiritually connected to those ideas, because I never can. I don't feel like I can walk up to like my grandparents and be like, what gets you about this, and that like we could have like a discussion that wouldn't get weird, in some way. But like this guy kind of gives me some insight that I've always kind of wanted, but never like knew how to ask for. So I think that part of it has become more valuable to me, and less dismissed, even though I feel that way about it. It's interesting. So I think I've learned how to read this book better too.
That's good. And I agree. I mean, I went to Catholic church for the first time the past 2 weeks, which is really very interesting. And I'm so glad I did it while I was reading this book, because it's something I'm like, oh, I am for sure not a Catholic, but it was so nice to go to Catholic church and be like, oh, like this is what it's all about, because it is very like, it was just such an interesting experience like from that. And I feel like that's kind of what you're saying. It's like, there's like, you kind of have to like interpret the way somebody talks through that. And then it's trippy reading something about Saint, because he mentions Paul so much. Paul, wait, who wrote the book of Revelations? Is it John or Paul?
John of Patmos, apparently.
Okay.
That's like in the apocalyptic witchcraft book.
Yeah. And so reading it in this chapter versus reading it in that book is like so trippy.
Yeah.
Because I mean, and you could see how like the rejection of the figures that came up for John, right? And it was like, oh, this is death and this is a whore, and this is like all of the legions of all this stuff coming at me. And it's like, well, maybe you have to like embrace that and like go through it, like that's like how you reach. And so just to see the wall like here still in this chapter, I was like, whoa, like there's like other levels to this that I didn't really like see. I wouldn't see that right away unless reading like a book that has like the opposite perspective, it was like really cool.
Yeah.
Do you have stuff to add on that or?
No, I think you said it really well. That was really good. Like, yeah, and that is the thing, like, yeah, dive deep in the waters. But this chapter somewhat is getting, like, I think you even mentioned it, is somewhat getting into that, where like it's this hope infused into the actual creative act. And like and he even says at some point that she's pouring 2 cups and one of them is like poison or something. So that's like part of the spiral. It's part of the necessity of the spiral.
I missed that.
So it's like, and it's part of how evolution can even happen on either side. So it's like it's like the nature of like the poison and again, it's like a yin yang pair of like the poison and the life-giving like hope. And ultimately it's hope that raises us up.
Yeah. It's what he says on like page 470 when he's like talking about like the serpent's venom and the tears of the virgin, and they flow eternally together in the flow of life.
Oh. Nice.
And it is this goddess figure too, like, and it's so similar to that in the apocalyptic witchcraft, it feels,
It's trippy.
I'm gonna have to read that next. I know you guys are reading it now. I like so much on my plate, but once a little pause for books or something, because I've been wanting to read that book.
I'll give it to you when I'm done, because it's a book I feel I can give to you. Like I could give it to someone and it's not something that I'm gonna like Like it just kind of changes your mindset right away. There's kind of nothing. I mean, I'd love to read it again, maybe, but I doubt in my life I'm going to read books more than once at this point, which maybe isn't a way to think, but I'd love to give it to you when I'm done.
All right, maybe, but I like dog ear shit and stuff, so I might just like buy one because like I fold
Okay.
the corners on the book when I have a quote on there that I like, and like I fold it pointing downward if it's near the top, and like I point it upward if it's pointing to the bottom, and like I don't know, I do weird stuff to the book that I don't want to do to your copy.
Okay. Yeah, this book is more like
I want to be able to
poetry.
have it to like reference. Yeah.
It's more like poetry too, but you should own it to reference. I'll send you a link. I'll put it in the show notes. I'll put it in the email. Check out the show notes.
I actually bought my copy. I found a copy at Ritual Craft, which is pretty sweet.
Wait,
Yeah.
there's a wait, the website, right?
No, you know the
Oh, the
store?
place we went.
Yeah, yeah,
They had it.
yeah. They had it. Yeah,
That's really cool. He took me
Yeah,
to the
it's like-
magic shop.
Denver has the best like just witchy store. It's like top notch.
That store was like awesome.
Beautiful, like beautiful store, all with like the dark witchy aesthetic.
Mhm.
All
Like
the ritual implements and like a whole like
skeleton.
corner with a library and like this chat cabinet that has like cursed items. So you go near these cursed items and you're like, holy shit, you almost feel it. You're like, wow, this like bone necklace they have in there that's like you just going near the cabinet and you're like, yeah,
No,
it's
dude,
wild.
no. I don't like.
Yeah.
I don't want cursed items. I feel like
No.
I feel like I know what cursed items feel like because I think my family's probably had some.
Oh yeah.
I
But they
mean,
have
okay,
it like
so,
tucked in a
like, my aunt-
corner of the library that's like you don't need to go there.
I want to check it out.
Yeah.
I want to check it out. I mean, like I like looking at stuff. I don't need to bring it home.
Yeah.
I-
Yeah,
I
exactly.
don't know, that's
You
fun.
look at it from a distance. But yeah, it's a cool store. Anyways,
It is. That's cool you
Where
found
is
it
it
there,
at?
though.
Yeah.
It's in Denver. If we should visit Denver some point. I went to
Yeah.
I went there and I was seeing a Tipper show and then I'm like, Cody,
Yeah.
want to get together? Okay. Worked out. So one day. Yeah, the place, okay, what I did want to say before, the places that I had question marks though were places where I felt like some of the breakdown started to kind of peek through of the so like on 472 was my first question mark, like the middle of the page. Here is why we say no to dualism seen in the light of the future, just as we say yes if we're looking at it in the light of the present. It is hope, the fruit of the marriage of opposites, which defends dualism for us and which not only invites us to believe in the final unity of opposites, but also to work with a view of realism in this unity. I feel like, why would you, I just don't like that it's like no to dualism and then yes to dualism. Like there's certain things that, that's like kind of a basic example, but that was just like, I think when we're saying like the serpent's venom and the tears of the virgin, it's like, and then that's all both necessary to create this spiral. And like, yeah, he's not saying that the serpent's not a necessary thing, but I just feel contradictory. I feel like, it's almost being a little controversial, of the marriage of opposites.
Like-
Does anybody know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, well, I think he's saying that like two things flow together that are like two separate things, but they come together to make one flow, one river, like how she's pouring the two vases into one river. I think it's like when you say no to dualism, you're only recognizing the one river where they're both together and they're like the circle of life. But when you're saying yes to dualism, you're acknowledging there's venom and there's like pure water in there.
Oh, okay. So I just didn't
because yeah, like he went back and forth a few times where like that's why I would go back and read what he read before and I'd be like, is he arguing with himself for a second? Like I was like, wait, yeah, but I went back and read that again too because I was like, Because sometimes like I get like the primordial action and the eternal waiting, I feel like are one and the same, but also different. So he was doing the same thing with those ideas. So when I made it down to that part, it made more sense. But I like went back and read the page before that. So I was like, it's like, yeah, they're separated in order to act according to the two different modes, namely the water in which the principle of growth and evolution of the biological and spiritual. And like, so it talks about why there's like the orb like or the flow above and the flow below. And that like they're both the same flow. And that's how it's like you get to the marriage of opposites. So I really like that, and because I feel it's important to acknowledge, you know, not like black and white like perspectives, but seeing the like gradient of the perspective. And then it's almost like you were saying, where you see like it goes from bounds and leaps, where you see like the bounds and leaps, which are the separates, to the continuity, which is the flow of both together as one. So it kind of like he just keeps reestablishing that analogy throughout, which I like.
Yeah,
Like, you're
here's
gonna get it. I really like the omega point too. I like that idea.
that it's like on a mega point that's like magnetizing. Is that kind of the idea? Yeah. Yeah, that was cool.
Yeah, especially with the full moon. When I was reading that, I was like, the omega point. You can feel when there's like a threshold of like energy or like a surge or something, and you can feel things are just flowing naturally and kind of like building up in a different type of way, instead of it being like all of a sudden you're confronted with something. It's more like, oh, I'm preparing for this. I really like that idea. There's this like endowed readiness that I think life imposes on you in a positive way, with that kind of approach. I think it's kind of like also the natural gatekeeping of like knowledge and like ascension. Is like you can only go as high as you're ready to go, which I think is fair and beautiful, and it also holds the individual accountable for yes and no's, which I think was what one of his points of like having that dualism there in the first place was. I don't know, there's something, okay, I don't know if, okay, this may be an unpopular question, but is it like Christian thing to be like heaven, hell, bad, good? Because I feel like he struggles with like saying that there's dualism and no dualism, like often in multiple chapters where we've questioned his dividing of things. And then the way he kind of backpedals a little by connecting them back together. It's like he's almost having an internal struggle between like the views of like Christianity and the views that he knows are a little bit more aware and like maybe a little more broad in definition. And like he sees the continuity, but I feel like religion holds him in a black and white dualistic view. I don't know. Maybe that's just
That's
my perspective on it.
I agree, and that's why my question mark was there. Like that's kind of what I was trying to get to, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, can I read a long quote? Because I think this is such a good quote, and it comes
Yes.
back to that, like, this is when he's talking specifically about the two cups.
Go for it.
He says, just as there is fire, I don't know what page because I have a different book.
Okay.
Just as there is fire and fire, i.e., the celestial fire of divine love, and the fire of electricity due to friction, so there is water and water, i.e., the celestial water of the sap of growth, progress, and evolution, and the lower water of instinctivity, the collective unconscious, engulfing collectivity, which is the water of floods and drowning. Thus, the woman represented on the card of the 17th Arcanum pours water from two vases held in the left and right hands, which blend into the same stream. Alas, here is the tragedy of human life and mankind's history and cosmic evolution, the flow of continuity and heredity, tradition, and lastly, evolution. Bears not only all of that which is healthy, noble, and holy and divine of the past, but also that which was infectious, vile, blasphemous, and diabolical. All is born pell-mell, never-ending towards the future. What Verlaine said of the river Seine in his, of the flow of human life, mankind's history, and cosmic evolution. And he quotes a poem by Verlaine. But yeah, that it's like it's intermixed. It's like all part of like the like it's part of that spiral. It's like it is necessary. That's where he really is affirming that. And it's the tragedy is kind of necessary. And
Good.
that's a lot of what he talks about, I think, with Christ too. Christ is the sufferer. So it's like Christ relates to that, like the tragic part. So again, it's like the horizontal and vertical necessitating the spiral of creation somehow. It's beautiful.
That's beautiful. No, thank you that was good. Really,
But
for reading.
yeah. And I think a lot of like, yeah, his view on evil is that it's like, it's all just relative to our own experience, you know, that actually good is like, his view is, I think good is all encompassing. It's like, that's what ultimately just wins, so to speak. It's like, because evil is only relative, you know, it's only contingent, whereas good is all pervasive and infinite. And evil is like by necessity finite and you know, suffering doesn't last, you know. But good is everywhere always. It's like the idea that love is God, or God is love, you know. And God is everywhere always.
I mean, so what do you both think about that? Because I like how you summarize that, but I mean, my initial impression is I think it's more balanced than that, but I don't know if that's, yeah, what do you two think about what his
on
that?
On 475, he says the synthesis of truth, of salvation, its evolution in the path of the rainbow is with the immortal essence of the endeavors of the past. I don't know. He just goes into like it's purified and temporarily and accidental and it. Anyway, let me just summarize it. I agree personally. I think that everything's more of a continuum on a vaster scale than we can judge or recognize, and I think that we're only in our little kind of like bubble of awareness, and that to become aware that we are in like we're trapped in like that bubble of like building up the tower, even like with like, you know, oh, I want to get to nirvana or something, like even like with those types of endeavors, once you like put that down, you can like put those walls down and like really see and be in awe of like all the things that are actually at work. And so you can, I don't know, it's being like less judgmental and more about like navigation, instead of it being like this is that and that is that and being kind of like dualistic about it. You get into more of like that flow state of like it's all continuous, it's all changing, it's all flowing. So you don't sink as deep into the like material or the physical world and like all the things that are happening to you there, because you can kind of remain in that like awareness that there's something bigger and farther, like with like that flow. That like, yeah, if you're an ant and you have to walk a mile, that's going to seem like a lifetime of possibility, whereas like if you're a human, you can walk a mile, it's going to take you, you know, 15 minutes. I think it's like that difference in like perspective, like the way we think of things too.
That's kind of what I was trying to say, is like, that's where like evil is contingent in like the what might be called evil is contingent in the process, where it's like it's like the devil is in the details, right? It's like that, those little things that are happening that are causing us suffering, but like in the big picture, it's all just one big thing. And like good and evil don't really exist, right? But that's kind of good, you know, like that is kind of good because it takes us out of that suffering, you know. It's like takes us away from that. So suffering is like totally is contingent on like being caught up, you know. But being caught up is what generates the universe to even know itself, and you know, so it's like this big beautiful thing ultimately. You know, it's like that's all
Because
part of the
suffering is the
same.
awareness of itself.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the suffering that we've reached, like almost like a, instead of like a moral impasse, like the suffering is where we as a human or as a spirit realize, hey, yo, this is too far. This is not. I don't feel good with this future or this trajectory. Like it's saying, like it's talking about how like every idea, human or divine, which is rooted in the past, has its foliage in the future. So it's not even like, you know, the course of time, you know, like chooses itself based off of, you know, the actions and the reactions. And I think it's interesting that, you know, like even in like Iran and Taiwan right now, that there are people that are a certain way and are standing up for that and like wanting to change the moral compass of their part of the world. And I think it's interesting, you know, for humans as, you know, people that are like into magic or into meditation or spirituality and like self-growth, to have that kind of awareness of, you know, when like suffering within ourselves in the world is indicative that we've hit like boundaries and like futures that we don't want. And so we can like change direction or choose a higher path, or, you know, think about things differently to like not be caught up in maybe a tower building or construction instead of a growth process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I agree with
Because like towers aren't rooted either, but trees are.
yeah. I mean, but I mean, a tree doesn't really have agency how high it can grow, you know? So I think that's it's a question of agency too. Like I don't know, yeah, you can set conditions to be a certain thing, but in some regards, like there's a trajectory that's set that like if you're off course, it'll be one way. If you're on course, it'll be one way, you know? Like I don't know that there's I don't know, I'm still trying to figure that one out, but I guess it would
But
just
if you're
be a
like
question of
off
agency through it.
for, yeah, but would you, but if that was the perspective, then if you were off course for like one tiny microsecond, you'd be off course forever and you'd be fractaling off course. But I don't know. I don't know. I feel like every moment people or like things, life, everything has a chance to like change for the better. And I think by acknowledging and being aware of like suffering or like the cycles that we're hitting, or the fact that we may be constructing and growing, has become some of the things that we've needed to have happen within like our lifetimes, is like, oh, you know, noticing that climate change is a thing that we can work on, and you know, things like that, where we're actually changing our world based off of these like realizations. I think has become an effort in shifting our direction. It may be too late, like, you know, in like the physical realm of like changing the human's path of like consuming until we overpopulate the world and it doesn't have enough to hold us.
When I mean,
Or like, you know, I have the hope that we could fix that. I think we still have the chance to
like
fix
the
it, but,
language
you know,
of like too late and fixing, I think indicates that there was like wrong, like that, like, how am I saying this? Like I think some things are like set in course and it doesn't really matter if it like, I don't know that there's like this like good and bad kind of agents. It's like being in flow with it instead of like thinking that there are contrived like choices that we can make to like, yeah, it's just being more aligned with what I'm not making that much.
knowing that the choices have been made, and yeah, like the choices that have been made and set it in motion, that we can't change it, but we have to like work our best through it type thing.
Yeah, and more like just kind of surrendering to some of the like things that go on and know that like you doing that, like it's not so that you're like trying to prevent or like create something per se. It's more like you're trying to like be aligned. I think that's what he is kind of like, just relating it back to the book with like being in flow with the divine, right? I don't know that it would be like, yeah, you get inspiration and hope from that place, but I don't know if that's so like judgmental on everything you do. I don't know. I'm not articulating
I
this
mean,
right.
he like
Stop talking.
yeah, well, he like points out the sense of nobility of the heart. And I think that kind of like implies that when you're like in that flow state, there is like a nobility, to which he was talking about, like what is in the very beginning, where it was talking about it's like an upward and forward type force. Like the agency is like the motion is like upward and forward in like a spiral instead of like in the circle, and that like the accessibility to that is kind of like the nobility of heart, and like in trust that like to be in that flow you have to have like that kind of, I guess, openness to flow with the thing instead of trying to control the thing, like what you were saying.
Yeah. And to do with what means you were given too. Like I think that there's a false kind of like paradigm going around that like the three of us could help stop climate change. Like no, like we can be it just with our socioeconomic class, we can't have an impact on that. And like there's no way to not use, like there's little things we can do, sure, but like, and we can promote actions as consumers, you know, to like vote with your dollar or whatever they say, but like I don't think the like responsibility should just be on like this class's shoulders. Do you know what I'm trying to say? Like going in flow doesn't mean that I'm not going to buy a water bottle at the store. And that sucks. And like I'm upset about that, you know, because our water sources are so shitty and we know how they are. But it's like I don't have the money to go buy my alkaline water right now, so I'm using sink water. You know what I mean? That's something that I can't really like prevent. And for me, like, I mean, I'm just trying to like give up on some of those, like not give up on holding myself like too accountable for things that are so outside of my control.
There's a so like, I also was talking about this. I think Gordon White's book Animistic is answering a lot of these questions in really great ways.
Oh, cool.
That's the other book I was just talking about earlier, but that's like it's a really sweet book. But he's talking about how like where we've got to like decenter or the only locus of agency from the human, like because that's the Western paradigm of like we're the only agents, and there's this clockwork universe that's a dead machine that's maybe broken, you know, we've broken it as agential humans.
I don't agree with that.
Yeah, and so he's getting away from that thinking to where like it's actually like a relief that we're like, it's like okay, but it's like recentering us into like and giving up like places their own power, places and other animate things power, like empowering the other and like standing back a little bit and letting the universe sort itself out in a sense. So and like because all our like grasping and like trying to
causes so much bigger like issues,
bigger problems.
Yeah. And like mass, like on a massive scale, like I don't like the rhetoric of like classist people saying that like if you choose different, this might not have happened. Like that's like fucking shitty, you know? Like I don't want to live my life like, and I have been on that paradigm, and like it was really depressing. And like it doesn't mean that you stop being conscious of the decisions that you're making so that you can prolong what type of life you want to live and like what you want to see in the move forward. Like I'm not saying to abandon that, but at the same time, just like no holding of the weight on yourself or society, you know, is something that I have to constantly remind myself. I mean, today it came up of like what products, because everyone freaked out. This is actually a super relevant example. I work in a hair salon, you know, so there's this app that scans how clean the products are. And Davines,
yeah, I love that app.
It's a good app. And, you know, so they were going around, oh, Colton King's 100%, which is gnarly. It's this like, you never get 100% of like, this is the cleanest thing. And he's like, you can eat this. Like, this is crazy. And it's like small batch, local guy literally makes this product and like, we have it on our shelves, you know? But then Davines is a brand and it's not a big brand and it's a B Corp. mind you, and all which, let me tell you about B Corps are funded by, like, the B Corporation logo is funded by the Rockefellers. So that to me just, and I know that that's my bias against that family name and that amount of money. And like, yeah, there is bias that I hold from there, but that to me, like, throws any arguments that that's like better or worse out of the door necessarily, because that means that like you can be in a certain type of class to get in that thing. But that's me being upset on another level. But then the product scored like a 2%, which is like so low. And this company professes how clean they are to the environment. And I'm like, did nobody know that? Like, I knew that about Davines. I'm like, they're not that clean. Like, it's not that clean of a shampoo line. And everyone was so upset in the salon today. And it just like shattered people's minds. And I was like, dude, you didn't know that this wasn't clean? Like, yeah, that's like a marketing scam. And they were getting mad at me because they're like, you're wrong, Haley, they're a B Corp. And I'm all, that doesn't mean shit either. You know, like, what are you saying? Like, so sorry, that was my long rant.
B Corps are like the capitalists, like the capitalist ideology trying to like make it.
It's
like,
the capitalist gold stamp.
Yeah, like make capitalism okay. Let's create B Corps so that we can do that. And on some level, I think they're like they're making an okay effort, but it's like, but then it's like validating corporations for still not
scoring a 2%, on this app and claiming that they're a clean brand. Like, and it was like, I mean, it literally shattered like half of our salon more than half of our salon uses that line. And it like shattered people like in the back were like, what the actual fuck? Like, what am I putting on my client's head? You know? It's like, you never know. It's the hair industry. So bad.
I mean, it's the same thing with like solar and wind power and stuff. It's like a noble effort, but then it's like extracting rare earth metals, upsetting the migratory patterns of insects and birds, like
destroying the lands too.
Yeah,
they still have to bulldoze the land to clear it.
Yeah, so it's just it's like solutionism introducing new problems again. It's like, and that's like, and people are still like, oh, yay, solar, and it's like, no, that's we need to like, that's a patch.
I would think that there'd be more like, I don't know, creative ways, like energy.
I think they're overcompensating though, and like in a way where, you know how like they make money off trends. Well, they're like, oh, people care about the whales, so it's like, you know, like profit off of people giving a shit about the whales, even though like we know at a certain point there's only so much we can do and so much money that goes there. Like pretty much any aid you give financially through Red Cross or whatever, like a percentage of that goes to where it's supposed to go. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of, you know, overhead and blah, 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 red tape, pay this company, pay this, you know, for the ability to even do what you're doing. Like even just like those companies that say they're vegan or healthy, they have to pay for that stamp on their cardboard box on the outside of their product. Like you spent money to tell somebody that you're doing this thing instead of just being that thing.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I think also, you know, relating it back to the card, I think a part of our existence is always going to be that. Like there's being alive and being human, like literally taking up space, which is a beautiful thing, but taking up space in this world requires some form of destruction. So like just mitigating that, you know, and understanding where the balance is within yourself and like how that can be transformed is really more of the mindset that we need to promote, like transforming, alchemizing your state in order to have the destructive force that you have not be so widespread that it is. Maybe. I don't know.
And well, yeah, and like learning to be in relation with the other things again. Like that's really really important. Like not like relations so that you're not the only, humans aren't the only agent again, like so that you're like cooperating and yeah.
Yeah. One day.
Well, yeah. I think it's like an accountability in like a spiritual way too, to be like, okay, like I'm trying to step on the least amount of, you know, plants and animals as they walk across this earth as possible, you know, but kind of being accountable and like real with like, okay, I'm going to have to step on some things are going to die for me to have to eat or, drive my car, or you know what I mean? Like there's going to be pollution, there's going to be these things. And so I think in a way, just like acknowledging that and like not even like taking it on and like, oh, I have to like save the world or feel so bad about this, but just like understanding that there's some venom in your water and that's part of like that flow that we're interacting with. I felt like that was what I kind of resonated with that part of the chapter too, because it was almost kind of like reassuring, like that we kind of all have this like universal, not like suffering, but it's like the suffering of progress, where like for us to be able to move forward, we're going to make mistakes, and these mistakes are going to make you feel bad, but they might be inevitable mistakes, or they might be things that like were already set in motion, in which you were like born into, and that you can acknowledge that you dislike and stuff. So it kind of gives, I don't know, I like acknowledging the things that bother me about the world without having to feel like I have to single-handedly Superman change the world, because that's, if everyone felt this like super important about certain issues, we could all kind of like move towards those things and give them gravity. And that's why I kind of like seeing like social revolutions in countries that have been historically oppressed right now, because I feel like there is this wind of change that is naturally occurring in places that feel the most suffering. And I'd hope that, we can all acknowledge that, like, oh, like I shouldn't feel bad for being a woman that lives here that has those freedoms. I should just hope for that for other people as well. So it's like hope instead of anger or pain or reflection on the suffering. It's more like acknowledge the suffering and then hope for a better outcome, which I think is kind of what, when people are like, oh, like what do monks do for the world? They like go and meditate, and they like don't, pick up arms and fight, and they don't turn into politicians to like tell you what to do. But I'm like, no, there's this value in this energy in which like you put towards things. And I feel like that's like part of the book is talking about the kernel and the potential for the seed versus like the actual like sprouting, nourishing, watering, and like growing of the thing. That's like, I don't know. I think that's what I really liked about that metaphor, and him coming back to it, using the other cards to kind of like be like, this is the soil, this is, this is the heat, this is the fire, this is the water, like throwing in the ingredients.
Ooh, that just gave me a really cool image of the star. Like, it's interesting thinking in like terms of opposites and how any concept kind of invokes its opposite. I'm thinking like of the star and the seed, right, as like opposites in a sense. Like the star is like radiative, but they're like opposites that contain each other. The star is radiative and the seed is like compacted, like potential, but the star is like a potential as well. So there's like this interesting like dichotomy.
And the seed absorbs the potential in the photosynthesis.
Exactly.
So cool.
Trippy. And see, that's a way of using energy that's not solar panel or, I mean, like there's gotta be like, sorry, I get really upset by the energy, the energy issue. It's okay, yeah.
There was a big breakthrough this week. Did you see that?
No.
The first, they did the first fusion reaction that generated more energy than was put in.
Ooh.
Yeah. Or last week, I guess, yeah. But
like,
yeah.
Okay, but what does it and that's cool. That's really cool. It's like, what does it require to do that? Is that like nuclear fission?
It's fusion.
Fusion.
A lot of energy. Yeah.
It seems like that'd be really hard and wasteful to do, but like in a maybe it has historically.
Yeah, they put in a shit ton of energy to get very little back out, but this time they got more energy out than what they put in. And that's
okay, right?
Cool. Yeah,
that's interesting. I feel like
fusion is what happens inside a star. So yeah, so it's relating to the star.
yeah, see energy.
Yeah.
I feel like we should. Okay, this is just my like brain being weird in the past, but it's like, why don't we use like the Earth's magnetic system to like find out some way of transferring energy, or like having like there's got to be something in that. And I don't think enough, like I haven't heard enough about that to be like, like the earth has a magnetic field. That seems like very just like, and it's always going to be like having some sort of magnetic field. Like, I feel like yeah, that's where my physics career ended, but here we are. I'm full of good ideas. Someone go.
Physicist.
Well, they were
either.
looking at using energy of tidal bulges or the swing of the earth, but we have like this weird tilted axis. So like we have like a little hitch in our giddy up, like a little wobble. And so, I mean, the smallest things that we can put and the farthest away they can be are the satellites, like to be able to like stay in orbit and like, you know, kind of not need to use a motor. Like once they get into like an orbit, they can kind of like sit there, and if they need to be put back into place, they turn them on and you jet them back into the coordinates. But for the most part, they're just like being pulled around. And they've tried to do that with like, remember it was like Apollo 1301, like that movie where they like try to use the gravity to like slingshot themselves back around the moon so they won't just float out into space forever because they missed their mark by a little bit. I was like, yeah, I mean, the amount of money and I think time into that is gonna be like hard. But I think there's so many different ways that we can be creative with these problems. And, you know, in a way, I like that it's breeding this like beauty of like A, hope, and B, like transformation of like our society and what it looks like. You know, I think that's interesting that people are getting more and more on board, not only because, oh, it's the quote unquote right thing to do, but it's like, well, that's the natural progression of things now,
Yeah.
which I, you know, in certain ways. So it's like just that thinking and that vibe. We're like kind of getting on the same train now. So, I mean, those kinds of things make me feel like there is hope for change in that continuum where like there will be change, but I think that we're doing a decent job. I mean, we're trying. Humans are so cute. Like I sometimes imagine like what it must be like to be like not like God or something, but like an angel or something that's like, oh, like I'm like just trying to babysit you guys, and you just kind of like
You stink
nudge
all
you
the
in the right
time.
direction and like hoping that you guys are
You're
so cute.
I was like, ew,
It makes me feel
go away.
no, it makes me feel like there's things looking out for us and like a bigger order in a way that even like the greater energies and entities wish for hope and love and like prosperity and like us to grow and instead of construct. And I don't know, I think that's when we were reading about the other card with the story where there were two different stories, the Adam and Eve story, and then there was more of the like the Egyptian story where, you know, there was the beings that were entrusted into making the animals. But yeah, and I was just thinking how like almost like looking back on it, how endearing it was that they tried to like find out what it was so they could like do it too, like how to make things. I was like, oh, it's a very human thing to do, or like a very like endearing thing, because once they did it, they learned that that was like a lower way of feeling, being, or thinking, like that they could have they made a mistake, you know, but that wasn't like the end all be all of it. It was like life went on and things were like okay, but and we all had to like figure out a way around that like
Feel
struggle.
like surrender and trust.
Yeah.
What always gets me in the Garden of Eden is that the tree exists. Like there's a tree. Don't eat from this
Don't eat
tree.
it.
But God put this tree in the garden. You know, like it's like
Yeah, I agree.
Do you guys
Like,
think do you think there ever was a choice between yes and no, or do you think that it was always destined to be the fall?
I don't think there's a choice there. Like at some point, because time doesn't like, I mean, if they're in this I mean, I'm just saying, if the like, you know, story is like accurate in that way, if they're in this garden forever of Eden, at some point, like everything that's gonna happen is gonna happen. So like there's gonna be a possibility of that. If the possibility exists, that means that a version of you has done it. Like that's what I always think. So it's just aligning yourself with like versions that comprise the path of like that you want to be on, I guess. I mean, I don't know. I'm kind of revising that as I go right now because that contradicts a little bit. That's something that I've always kind of said, but might contradict some of the newer things I've been thinking about.
I don't know. I think the tree actually does represent the choice. That's what the tree is actually. It's like
Oh.
it is the tree of free will. It's like that. The tree represents like God giving us free will. So that's why God put the tree in,
Because they had free will.
because in order to give humans free will. Without the tree, there would be no free will, kind of thing. So
So
yeah,
then do you think the tree as opposed to the serpent represents the temptation more so? Because the serpent only
yeah, the
poses
serpent,
the option which is already there.
right? Maybe the
Tree seems to
serpent.
be the thing that's actually,
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like
yeah.
the,
That's
Well, the
if the tree is
serpent's
there
like
and you're
the
not supposed to eat out of
the
it, the tree
D-
is the temptation, not the serpent. The serpent's just the thing pointing out the other thing. Like Adam and Eve already know they're not supposed to eat out of it, so there's got to be some sort of like, what's up with that tree type vibe, you know?
the serpent's the messenger to tell them that they have free will. It's like the intermediary between the tree and the.
Well, isn't it like the DNA strand and like things like here, it's like the open-ended spiral, like the circle, and it's what in the page 480, it's whatever that's, I forget what that circle eating snake.
Ouroboros.
Ouroboros.
Yeah, Ouroboros. Like that's like it's just that's going to it's going to happen, right? Like that's a part of any type of movement and change and forward growth is going to be in making those mistakes and trying out those things and learning and having I think the tree,
Mhm.
I do think the tree represents the option, but the snake represents navigating to that tree.
Right. Yeah. There's
So
kind of
yeah, and then it
that.
comes back to the whole, was the snake lying when it said that you won't die?
Oh yeah. He says it wasn't lying, but it also wasn't telling you the whole truth or something like that, right? That was the conclusion.
Yeah, so I kind of wonder with that in the form of kind of like the vertical and the horizontal, in the sense that it's talking about how like it was equating the snake to like the horizontal and it being more of a circle, whereas like the vertical is more of a spiral. So with like this card, you know, like the stars and the celestial represents the like open-endedness of the possibility and hope and stuff, whereas like the water in the stream is more of a like literal path that's been carved over time that can't be necessarily deviated or changed, because that's just how it's been and how it always will flow, and that it is a mixture of like, you know, venom and water. I don't know, it's very interesting. I really liked the imagery of the card, like layering up so well with like the analogies in that way.
Agreed.
Yeah. Yeah, this has
So
become one of my
at
favorite
this
cards.
point, yeah, so at this point with the star, it's kind of breaking that notion of the circle and creating only like a vision of possibility with spirals in a way, by acknowledging it, right, in that, in its full depth.
Agreed. I love the spiral image.
I love the womb image too.
Where was the womb? What part?
Hmm.
Is that towards the end? Because hope, maternity, and
Towards the end.
hereditary.
Yeah,
Heredity?
it's
Oh, maybe it is.
past 40.
But it's earlier where he talks about like the hope of the mother, right? Like mothers wouldn't have babies if they
True.
didn't have hope, kind of thing. So that
Mhm, mhm, yeah, oh yeah,
there's
that
like
was
the
back
symbology
in
of the mother. So like holding in their womb all the possibility,
Yeah.
of like pleasure and pain. That resonates again with apocalyptic witchcraft because it heavily goes into that. Like
I am not there
pretty
yet.
big time.
So
Like,
next I'm in the dream part, so
oh yeah, it goes into
probably
that.
next chapter.
Yeah,
there.
how like
Well, there's this cool quote about like that whole like circle versus spiral on like 481, where he uses the excerpt I would have been suffering and unhappy for far too long if God had made known to me much sooner things that he acquainted with me now, thanks to the fruits born in me from the fertile foundations of my friend. This is why these magnificent gifts were deferred for so long. It's not only like, oh, like, I don't know, it's just like that part kind of resonated so hard with like continuous instead of bounds and leaps, and almost like, you can't get more than like, life doesn't give you more than you can handle. And I've always hated that expression. But I really liked the acknowledgement of like the depth of what that means in that statement, in the sense that it acknowledges your growth and change and movement and action and aspiration towards hope and ascension, and more of a vertical interaction with the feeling instead of an apathetic horizontal, where it's like, oh, what does this world look like for me until I die, and like only think about that. It's like, oh, what does this, how does this world feel like, what are the undertones of the emotions and like the morality and like the vertical experience of this world. And I feel like in a lot of ways, though the world may seem like it's totally messed up right now, like I feel like there's been a lot of vertical growth, and that the horizontal growth hasn't necessarily caught on. And I think it's not necessarily meant to do the work there. Like, that's not where this work is being done. This work is being done in a different way, because obviously that's not working, and we've kind of deviated a little bit. I feel like there's a lot more people open to having that experience with like this kind of material and this kind of idea. I mean, I feel like Haley and I'm sure you have, Cody, where you have better conversations with people. You can go out to a place and have a conversation about like any of the things that we actually care about. Whereas I think that even back like a few decades, you had to be like really secretive about who you told what you were into and what you believed, or you might get persecuted. You might be a communist, you might be a fascist, you might be, something that threatens their line that they're going in, and I think that, like, to not get burned at the stake for talking about things now is pretty much like a vertical growth for us, even though that's such a dark place to grow from. Like, I think there's been a lot of that that we've worked on through the suffering of our own selves.
Agreed.
Which this card has been like, oh, like that's so sweet. Like, I really like that. Because it kind of does go back to like the devil too, where we're like our own worst enemy, and that we need to like almost like get out of our own way to like enter the flow.
Totally agree.
He got really John heavy near the end.
Yeah, John heavy. I mean, it's interesting he brings up thelema so much. Is this before? No, this isn't before Crowley's thelema. So I just thought that was really interesting to define the word thelema, because I didn't know that was what it meant, which is imminent desire. What? 488.
Oh yeah, yes. 48.
You might not have read this part because it's like the last 3 pages. But yeah, this agent acts in a matter of spiral between earth and heaven. For if one separates the thelema, imminent desire, and the depths of matter from its material envelope, it doth ascend from earth to heaven, and again it doth descend to earth, and uniteth itself in itself the force from things superior and things inferior in the matter of the spiral which ascends and descends. So I just thought that was kind of cool in transformation and in flow states of thelema. I didn't really know that that's like what that meant. Kind of cool. And then ends with a strong Hermeticism is the future. And what I love, the tradition of Hermeticism blossomed in the past and must live in the future. This is why a new modern summary is required, which will be as viable as the Emerald Table and as the major arcana of the tarot. It is she who is the mother of the future, and this is why her message confronts us with duty towards the future. That's the card. Do you think that there needs to be a new Emerald tablet? Maybe this will be the last question, unless either one of you else have a question, but do you think there needs to be a new Emerald Table or Major Arcana of the Tarot? And how do you think, so A, do you think that there needs to be one? And B, do you think that's even possible in today's like media heavy stage?
I'm not sure what you mean.
Okay, so let me answer because maybe I'm not sure. I think that if you, I'm not sure about like a new Emerald Table. I think the tarot, I don't know that you can, unless you make like a whole new paradigm, which I guess like the Emerald Table is, then maybe you can make a accessible game-ish type of thing around it, you know, like I don't see why that wouldn't be able in the realm of possibility. I'm not quite sure if our paradigm supports these type of like profits per se anymore. And that's kind of what I mean by, even if there was something that was written like the Emerald Table, it kind of gets washed out by all of the other like writings that are going on at the time, because media like goes so quick now and we have access to so much information that I don't know that there could ever be something as profound as like the Emerald Tablet or like the Bible, you know, because it kind of gets washed away with all of the other works and all of the other like gods that exist. And I think our egos have gotten to a place, and as every man and woman is a star right now, I think it's hard to like really have some type of profity type figure, you know, and have anyone take them seriously or even listen to them without being deemed a cult or like have some type of flaw in their thinking.
I mean, I think there already has been a natural like building upon the Emerald Table in which like more like new layers of the table like face have been like laid down, you know, with like Gandhi and Martin Luther King, you know, their tactics of nonviolence revolutionized what was possible for any movement across the world from there on out, and like such an ascending positive way. Like we're not sinking below this, you know, kind of give like a glass floor to it in a way where we're not going to the stream underneath. We're not interacting on that level. We're talking about something higher and we're not going to stoop. And I felt like they did a good job. And I feel like, I know this sounds like a very trivial way, but I think that with technology has come accessibility for healers. And, you know, for lack of a better example, people like the worst example would be like people like, you know, Billie Eilish or somebody that proves to teenagers that you don't need to be pretty or popular or say the right thing or act the right way or dress a certain way to be talented and to be valued and to be heard. And I think that that's something that they needed to be provided, and a space they needed to feel safe in, and that they've reclaimed their power in the social like the social network and like online and stuff by like not needing it to be what we created it for in like a certain way. Like we created it in more of a superficial babble way, and they've taken it, and artists and musicians and graphic artists and people have taken it and made it a platform that is for them to do good and to ascend and to share and to create. And I feel like that's going to be more inevitable because I feel like hope floats to the top. And so like we're always kind of like ascending towards that thing that's pulling us forward, and like shit does sink to the bottom. And you go online, and after a few months or time will tell, like nobody's going to want to keep clickbaiting on news that makes them cry or angry. And that gets old. They're just using that platform and they're going to go somewhere else or do things at the time, hopefully, you know, instead of staying in the circle and continuing to clickbait on the same upsetting news, they're choosing to spiral. Yeah. And I think that that's something that, you know, those negative things have provoked in us. And I don't know, I feel like there's hope even for the most like physical and material of those struggles. I feel like there's been a lot more growth there, like recently too. Like people have noticed, like, I don't know, with COVID, people have had to kind of like really figure out what to do with their time and their mind and their body and create a different type of balance that isn't from social interactions or going out or, you know, being popular. They've had to like really like make themselves into a full person again that isn't linked to those things. So I don't know. I feel like we've done a lot of work to keep going forward with. I don't know. So yeah, I mean, to answer your question, I think it's already happening naturally, but I don't think that it will solidify till like we look back on it, you know. Like we have social activists that are like young, like Greta and that girl that got shot for protesting, you know, like yeah, I mean, that's
Greta,
healthy for the, but that's like I know I'm not like, necessarily
political
like I don't like,
freaking puppet.
no, but for like young kids to feel like they
All right.
can have
I
hope and stuff, I
know
don't know. I
that's
mean,
good,
yeah, you
and
know what I
I'm not
mean.
trying to. Yeah, sorry, I'm
I
just
don't want to like
too
like
skeptical.
egregore them, yeah, or like make them into a false like prophet type thing. But just having a new generation of hope is refreshing to see, because once
That's
we
not
stop
like the
seeing
Emerald
that kind of stuff,
Tablet.
like
Like I
no,
feel you.
but I mean,
think
I
that's
feel like it's like
beautiful.
dust on the top of
Hope
the table.
exists for sure, and that's definitely you definitely summarize like the beautiful things that the card comprises of in today's like landscape. So that's really cool. All right. Any final thoughts?
I was gonna just answer your question too, is that we already kind of have all the information that we could possibly need, you know, at our fingertips. So
I agree with that.
just a matter of finding it and coming to it, and finding the others, as Doug Rushkoff would say.
Ooh, and maybe making one for yourself. I kind of like that too.
Making a tablet for yourself, yeah,
Yeah.
or a deck or a card or whatever, yeah.
Like how I live right now, and then revising that as you gain more knowledge, you know?
That's cool. Yeah, I like it.
Cool idea.
But yeah, like
Maybe I'll do that. I think there's like people in Etsy that will like custom card decks for you and stuff too, where you could like create the deck, and then whenever you need new cards added or you know taken away, you can like be like, oh, I want to like add this card and like take away this card, or just add this one, keep completing the deck.
I mean, I did that with my card game, but it flopped. It never aired, so it couldn't actually flop because nobody ever knew about it except the circle. So you were the only ones. But I'll revise it and then I'll redistribute it to
you,
anyone.
you still got something there. You still got
Yeah.
something.
Once I'm a world-renowned spiritual healer,
Yeah.
then I'll
Yeah,
distribute
put your name
masses.
behind it, and then it's just off to the races when you have fame.
You know, what'd be cool is like a card deck where it's like, you know, those choose your own adventure books where you have to like choose which page to do next based off the decision
That's
of
me.
like the page, you know, like that you end on. You're like, oh, what you know, go to this page if you want to read this outcome, or go to this page if you want to get outcome
As a card game or what?
of like a card deck, kind of like random
Oh, I think we all cut out.
and knows, or like the person asks like yeah or next people, and then you go to the next card based off of what it. Oh, hello.
I think we lost you there.
Can you hear me?
I think we cut out while you were talking.
Oh no. So it like choose your own adventure, you know, when you read those books with the choose your own adventure, where you like turn to this page if you choose to do this action as the character, and turn to this page if you know, it'd be kind of like a card game like that, or, like not game but like tarot like that, where you could like choose your path based off of yes and no's, branching off of each card.
You should do that. That'd be interesting.
Well, that's kind of cool. And then like you arrive at like some kind of divinatory place, or the journey is part of the divination.
Yeah, so then you do
Still
yeah, and then you can actually get some kind of answer, but you're feeling out the answer within yourself.
dig it. Yeah.
That'd be cool.
We could experiment with playing with tarot like that, because like if you like pull a card, and then you can like see what's in it, and then you know, like if you're asking a question or looking for a path, and then like you keep honing in on your path based off of like it's, or you could like do it like blackjack, where you like hit me or don't hit me, you like either choose to stay here or I like choose to take another card. Then you could tell if you're like ready to move on, or if you're still working on the that is in front of you type thing.
I'm gonna stop the
Okay, you got
recording.
my wheels turning, because I really like board and card games, particularly the modern ones. So like I'm really interested in, and I've thought about like designing games. I'm like,
Magic
I
games.
like this idea. And there's some games that like have a similar thing. They're not like, they don't have any kind of like mystical or mytho-poetic undertones. So like they wouldn't work with that. But I think applying that to a game style like this game that I have, called Seventh Continent, but it would be really cool.
I'm gonna
It's a
stop.
card game that's basically a choose your own adventure card.
Next
game.
time's the moon.
Have, like,